Did you hear about the mom that was cooking up some hamburger, and it's a Saturday night, getting it ready for supper, some frying it up, and her husband came in the middle of all that and said, "Hey, I need to run an errand. Why don't we all go? Maybe get some ice cream or something like that." And so he got in the truck, and Mom put the hamburgers on the back burner. Thank you. I need all the help I can get today, man. Something's wrong today. Jeez. And little Jimmy, jumps in beside his dad, and she goes and puts on her jean jacket that she had on the night before. And when she's putting it on, she smells this beautiful perfume because she had the jacket on the night before. She was at the mall. And you know how they have these little test things for perfume. And so she had squirted it some, and some of it got on her jean. It was very expensive perfume, and so it was lasting, and it was still there. And she took it all in, and oh man, it smelled so good. Thought maybe she'd go get her some, maybe get her a bottle of Splurge and buy a bottle of it for Mother's Day. And she went and she jumped into the cab of the pickup with her husband. Her son was in between. And as soon as she gets in, little Jimmy goes, says, "Wow, Mom, you smell good." And she says, "Yeah, I know. It's this perfume. I found it last night. Might go get me some. I tested it, and that's what you're smelling." He goes, "No, it's not perfume." And, she kind of thinks and wonders about it. She took a shower, but she didn't use that much soap. And says, "Well, I'm almost sure it's the perfume." And he goes, "No, it's not perfume." And she says, "Well, then what is it then?" He goes, "Hamburgers." What does a great mom smell like? What does a great mom look like? As I was pondering, usually we have special guests that come and speak to you guys. This year, as we prayed and contemplated, it seemed to fall to me, and I'm honored. To be honest, can't remember the last time I spoke to you guys on Mother's Day. We usually have a lady to speak. And so I was contemplating and praying about it, and we're interrupting the series, the home run series. We got one more message on how to get back to home plate after you won third. We'll talk about that next week. I decided, if I had just one shot, not a series, on motherhood, what would I do? And I decided, what better example to look at than Mary? I mean, there's all kinds of great ladies in the Bible. Certainly you could go to the Proverbs 31 woman. We've heard about that a lot. But I thought about how could you go wrong with the woman that God handpicked for His Son? So I decided, let's talk about Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I found out this morning in the first hour, I got more stuff than time to share it. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to have to move pretty fast. I want to pull out about 10 characteristics. I looked at every passage I could find that Mary had a part in it. And the interesting thing about her is that she was there every stage, from beginning to the very end. She was at every stage of Jesus' life. And every time that something about her appears, there's a little window that we can look into of who she was and pull out some observations about who she was and apply them, hopefully, to our lives, and especially to you mothers. And the first 3 or 4, I'm going to be right up front, the first 3 or 4 are going to be a little bit more to you young moms and even moms-to-be. And then as we get into, I think around 5, 6, or 7, some of you moms are a little older, kids are a little older, some of the things that you're hitting as some of the things that Mary hit in the middle of her journey. And then there's about 2 characteristics that I pulled out of Mary's life towards the end that are critical for some of you moms who are approaching the end of the race. So let's jump in. I'm going to try to cover as much of this, and maybe if I hurry, I won't have to cut off as much as I did in the first hour. Let's just jump in. I want you to write this down. Mary had a holiness. I want you to write that down. Mary had a holiness. She had a purity. And I get that from Luke 1, 26 and 27. Look at this. In the 6th month, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a what? To a what? A virgin pledged to be married to a man named who? Joseph. A descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. Now, look, I know, no one has to tell me. I can come across at this point pretty archaic when you're talking about the whole idea of virgin all the way to your wedding night. I know the world in which I live. I know how archaic that could appear. I know there's very, very, very few voices out there, and maybe very few voices, even in this room, about saving yourself for your wedding night. I'm not at all confident of where some of my parents are in this. I am absolutely, totally confident of how your peers believe about that, and even some of your mentors, your teachers, your coaches, your profs. I realize that there's a radically different position and feel about that virgin on your wedding night. But if it matters to you, if it matters at all to you, I can point to this verse and I can tell you without any question how your God feels about it. He chose a virgin. She was pure. She was chaste. And I want to say to all the young ladies who will soon be moms in your life, I want to say to all of you, God has given you something very precious, very beautiful, very, very sacred. Don't give it away so cheaply. Even you older ladies, you still have something very sacred. Don't give it to somebody in the wrong backyard. Stay pure. Stay holy. The second thing, I got to keep moving. Still under Mary had a holiness. Not only in that verse do I notice that God picked her because of who she was, a virgin, but I also believe God picked her because of who her fiance was. Don't miss this. It says that Joseph, it tells us who he was, a descendant of David. Jesus was supposed to come out of the lineage of David. So not only is Mary picked because of who she is, but Mary is picked because of who she has chosen to be her husband. She got the right guy. I don't think she would have been chosen if she wasn't pure, and I don't think she would have been chosen if she hadn't got the right guy. It matters who you choose. It matters. Be careful. Be choosy. Not the first guy who's ready to say yes or the first guy who's ready to jump in bed. You're sacred. You're beautiful in your master's eyes. He loves you exactly the way you are. And it matters to him who you choose. So be careful. I need to move on. Mary not only had a holiness, she had a special herald. A special herald, a special messenger. Look at Luke 1:28. Gabriel says to her, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Luke 1:34. "You will be with child and give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus." What a privilege. Isn't that something? Gabriel would come and give a special announcement, a special message to Mary that she has been chosen. And what I want to say this morning is that you have as just as sacred message. You might not have Gabriel showing up, but it's no less sacred of a message, no less sacred of a calling. Motherhood is a privilege. Motherhood is a sacred calling. It's a high calling. The message that Mary had that was so special is as special with you. So don't treat it cheaply. The world is treating it cheaply. There are many who are throwing away that opportunity. They choose the wrong guy. They choose the wrong time. And they choose to give away this sacred thing too cheaply. And then they get pregnant. 1,210,000 pregnancies this year. 1,210,000 pregnancies this year. And over 99% of those who have an abortion chose, they chose, let me put it this way. Less than 1% of those who've had this abortion performed on them, less than 1% are on women who are raped. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me that over 99% of the women who've thrown away this privilege, this calling to motherhood, 99% of them had a choice. They had a choice. So many, what you see on the bumpers of our cars says, "Keep your laws off my body." Or, "Keep your morality off my body. I have a choice. It's my right." Well, you know what that statistic tells me? Over 99% of those women had a choice. You know what that choice was? To become sexually active. What comes after that is a responsibility, not a choice. I know how unpopular that is. No one has to tell me. Marriage is a privilege. Don't treat it cheaply. Are you with me this morning? Number 3. Mary had a hang up. This is big for me. Mary had a hang up. Look at Luke 1:29. I want to say one thing that hit me just now that I can't afford to come by. I know who I'm speaking to. No one has to tell me that there are many who've gone through that procedure. And I want to tell you that God forgives. I have a Savior. I need a Savior. I am a sinner saved by grace. I do believe abortion is a sin. But we have this Savior, and He forgives sin. And that thing needs to be kept under the blood. Whatever's under the blood needs to be kept there. Don't carry it anymore. Are we okay? Mary had a hang-up. Luke 1:29. Mary was, listen to this. This is important to me. Mary was greatly what? She was what? Greatly troubled. at his words. And then Luke 1:34, listen to this. She asked this question, how will this be? You know what I see in those two phrases? I see grief, I see pain, I see confusion. And guys, oftentimes there is grief and pain associated with this motherhood thing. I've seen it on all kinds of situations. I've seen it where the motherhood thing has come too quickly, and the young lady wasn't ready. I've seen that in two of my daughters, where it wasn't totally planned. Kind of came up sudden, and it caught them off guard, and they weren't quite ready emotionally. They weren't quite ready mentally. And I remember, hope Lindsay doesn't mind this, but when she told us, she took us over to Jersey Lilies, and I didn't have a clue, I didn't know. And we were sitting there, I think we ordered, and while we were waiting, this tear starts going down her face, and man, stop the presses, man. If my kid's in trouble, what's up? And she shared with us. All the three of our daughters were planning, I think, to probably have a situation like Kath and I. We waited 6 years. We wanted to have some time alone. And I think Lindsay and Stephanie and Alicia wanted to kind of have that same pattern. Well, here it's about half that time, and she's making this announcement about, she's pregnant, and the tears start flowing down. And so I'm sitting there. Now think of this, guys. I just found out I was going to be a grandpa. I mean, that was my number one. You know what I'm saying? But I got this kid who's bawling her eyes out because she's not ready. So on the outside, I'm saying, Lindsay, I'm so sorry. Lindsay, bless your heart. It's going to be okay. On the inside, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to be a grandpa. You know what I mean? Sometimes it comes a little too fast. There might be some young ladies that's come a little too fast. There are others, it comes a little too slow. We've had many of our precious couples who've had to go through that. It's just not happening. It's not happening. And as I thought about that in preparation for this morning, I began to search the scriptures for ladies in the Bible that had trouble with that. There were many. In fact, I found at least 9. Ladies who were struggling to get pregnant and tormented in it. Great ladies, women of God. Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Hannah, the mother of Samson. They all, and Elizabeth, and it goes on and on and on. And of the 9, 8 went on to have kids. The only one that didn't was Michal, the wife of David. And that was nothing to do with Michal. It had everything to do with her dad, because the Lord didn't want a descendant of Saul's on the throne. All the rest of them, they had a family. And 6 of the 8 went on to have kids that went on and did great things for the kingdom. So don't lose hope. Hang in there. God's delays are not God's denials. We're not done yet. And there are others here that are not just a few, at least I think 3 different families right now that are having trouble with their pregnancy. Not just a few. And there's a lot of question, a lot of confusion. I lost a sibling between my sister and I. I'm totally convinced I'll see him someday in heaven. I lost a grandchild that didn't make it. There are many of you, many of you, the pregnancy didn't make it. Don't give up. Hang in there. There are some of you that need a miracle. There's a couple of you. I'm praying right now. I've been praying all weekend. I want to see a miracle. I'm claiming a miracle for you. We'll see. Okay? But even Mary had confusion and questions when it came to this mothering thing and this pregnancy thing. Hang in there. Don't give up. This number 4 is also for especially young moms. Mary had a heart change. Mary had a heart change. In Luke 1:38, it says, I am the Lord's servant. Mary answered, may it be to me as you have said. Now here's a young lady. She still is questioning. She still doesn't understand. In fact, this situation, this development in her life is going to cause big trouble with her relationship with Joseph. In fact, Joseph's about ready to put her away. You know, it really confuses him and he doesn't get it. And there's a lot of pain, a lot of confusion, a lot of unanswered questions. But in the midst of the unanswered questions, there comes a moment when Mary surrenders. There comes a moment when Mary trusts. And you're going to have to trust too. There's going to have to be a time where you trust and you surrender it to the Lord. Number 5. I hope am I right? Am I ready for 5? Luke 2:19. Mary had a hunch. Mary had a hunch. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. She says this 2 times. She says it when the shepherds come. They've had this great vision about her child. And she has this hunch when they lose. Remember when they lost Jesus? And they found him at the temple, and he's teaching the rabbis and the Pharisees and the scribes, and they're all astounded at his wisdom, and they're just making over him. And it says in verse 19, it says in verse 51, that Mary treasured these things up in her heart. She sensed that her child was special. See? She sensed her child was special. And I want to say to every mother in this room, your child is very special. Very, very special. God has big plans. Big plans for every one of your children. Back in the day, Kath and I, we were grappling with Steph. Steph inherited her daddy's learning disabilities, and school came difficult for her, and homework was taking 4 hours, and everybody was in tears, and everybody was on edge, and finally we had her tested, and I'll never forget that day. And they tested her, and we had this meeting. The test results were in. It was just for Kath and I. Steph wasn't there, just a little toddler. And I remember the counselor and the teacher and the principal, everybody was looking down these results, and in their effort to try to be encouraging to us, they would look down and says, now look, there's this score in this area. See, it's average. And then they'd look down here and say, see, she scored right here. See, it's average. Steph is average. And Steph is average over here. And she scored average over here. Now over here, she's a little below average, but it's not bad. But she's in the average range. And over here, and it was average, 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 average. And that word just began to hang on my heart. And after it was over with, we were walking out to the car. I could point to the spot. And I glance over to Kath, and there's this. This tear. Because there was a mama who didn't want to have anything to do with average for that girl. Several years ago, I came across a little poem. It says, I don't cause my teacher any trouble. My grades have been okay. I keep up my chores at home, and I'm at school every day. My teachers think I'm average. My parents think so too. I wish I didn't know that, because there's a lot of things I'd like to do. I'd like to build a rocket ship. I got a book that shows me how. Or I'd like to start a stamp collection. Well, no use of starting now. Because since I know I'm average, I'm just smart enough, you see, to know there's nothing special that I should ever expect from me. I'm just part of that majority, that bulk part of the bell, who live their lives unnoticed in an average kind of hell. There's nothing average about your kid. That child is special. God's got special things in store. Keep hiding those things in your heart. Don't give up on that. Number 6. Am I ready for number 6? I might get through this. Mary had a hand. I want you to write that down. Mary had a hand. John 2, 1 through 5. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother, I absolutely love this, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." I could just hear it. "Hey, they're out of wine. What are you going to do?" You know, I just love that. Jesus answered, "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." Now listen to this. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Do whatever he tells you. Now look, we're talking about the second person of the Trinity here. We're talking about, the Son of the living God. This guy had a hand in creation of the world, and his mama is giving him what for, and somehow that just blesses my heart. I mean, Jesus says it's not time, it's not my time. And she doesn't even answer him. She just turns to do what he says, like, "Get to it, son." Man, that blesses me. It even happened to Jesus. Doesn't that make him human? It makes him so human for me. I can relate to that. And what she doesn't realize is that she's actually launching Jesus into his public ministry. That was the beginning of it all. And she probably didn't realize it at the moment, but her role was going to be diminished from that moment on. Wasn't ever going to be the same after that, not with her and Jesus. She was going to have to share him with the world. And here's the thing that makes it heavy in my heart. There's some mamas this summer. It's coming. You're going to have to share your child with the world. You're going to have to either take them to some school somewhere and leave them there. Hardest thing I ever did in my life. Or you're going to have to walk them down some aisle. I walked all 3 of my kids down this aisle, longest aisle I ever saw in my life. Or you're going to have to take them to some job. And then you're going to have to go home. I remember when that moment came for Mom. I stayed home longer than most because my house was right there on campus. We lived on the campus of Marion College, now Indiana Wesleyan University. So I was there an extra 4 years, and I loved it, man. I loved being at home, having a home-cooked meal, bring it on. And it was a lot cheaper. But that moment came for me at the end of my senior year. And I was full-time at Lafayette, Indiana. It was about an hour and a half across the state. I remember driving with my car stuffed with junk, and Dad and Mom's car was stuffed with junk, and they drove. Kath wasn't on the scene yet. She was going to be, we were going to be married the year after that, so I was going on my own. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget how quiet Mom was that day. I'll never forget her placing those dishes in that cupboard so carefully, making sure they were all stacked and clean. I will never forget in her silence making my bed and making sure it was just perfect. I remember how tenderly she folded my clothes and put them in this drawer of this assistant pastor's parsonage that she was going to leave me at. And all the while, not a word. Dad and I were talking, Mom, not one word. And finally, everything was done. It was time to say goodbye. And Dad said, "Well, go get him, son," slapped me on the butt, and that was it. And then Mom stepped up. These tears start falling. She takes me in her arms. She whispers in my ear, "I'm so very proud of you." Plants one right there. Turns around, walks away. Things were never the same after that. She had a hand in launching me. Your moment's going to come, Mom. That's what you've lived for. That's what you have prepared them for. When that moment comes, Jesus will be with you. For some of you, it's coming this summer. And I'm praying for you. Number 7. This one came to me in the middle of the night last night. I threw Lincoln a major curveball this morning. There were two things that hit me that I want to bring to you today that just hit me last night, and this is one of them. Mary had a hurt. As a mother, Mary had a hurt. I want you to look at Luke 8:19, where it says, "Now Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him, but they were not able to get near him because of the crowd." In other words, they were standing in line. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to see you." He replied, "My mother and my brothers are these who hear God's word and put it into practice. These are my mother and my brothers." And I thought, ouch. You know, there's a part of me thankful for that phrase because that's me. That means I'm family. But there's another part of me that feels for that mom and those brothers that were standing in line, and all of a sudden they realize that they're not quite as high on the priority list as they were. You know, there was a day, even in Jesus' life, that Mary was all he had. I mean, she existed. If it wasn't for her, he would not exist. There was a moment in your life when your child would not make it through 2 or 3 days without you. But then they grow up. And they could make it through a couple days without you. They still hang on your skirt tails. They still love you. Their world lights up when you walk into the room. But it's not like it was when they were an infant. And then they get a little older. And your role diminishes some more until they get to be an adult. And guess what? Some crazy kid comes in and steals their heart away. And now you're number 2. Still not used to that one. But this is not Father's Day. This is Mother's Day. And your role diminishes. That is part of parenting. So don't cop an attitude. Don't get self-centered. Take the high road. Be a good mom. Let them become who they're supposed to be. Even Mary had to do that. Number 2, aren't you guys glad you came to church today? Mary had a hiccup. Write that down. Mary had a hiccup. She blew it. There's a time when she just absolutely blew it. She made a mistake. Look at Mark 3:21. When his family heard, let's back up. Let's look at Mark 3:20. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. Not even able to eat. Verse 21. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said he was what? In other words, he's crazy. They're showing up to save him from himself. Now, there's a part of this that kind of blesses me because isn't it true? Isn't it true? Just about every mother, no matter what the problem is, every mother says, "Just eat a little something." Isn't that true? Well, just have some of my soup and all your problems will go away. There's a little bit of that in here. Oh, he didn't eat? Well, I'm going to take over, you know. But then she comes in and they say he's going crazy and I need to step in. Well, he isn't going crazy, and they made a mistake. Mary made a mistake. Shock, shock, shock. She wasn't thinking right. She blew it. She was trying to help, but she blew it. Stop the presses. She's human. Just like you're human. There's not a parent in this room who doesn't have regret for some kind of decision you made back there. There's not a parent in this room that wouldn't do it different if you had to do it over again. Well, shoot, get a life. Everybody else, same way. The only person that fumbles the ball is the person in the bleachers, and if you're a mama, the bleachers aren't an option. You're on the field. You know how much my parents blew it? They blew it so bad one time. I was bugging my sister. I was in her room. And I wasn't supposed to be in her room. She started crying and yelling to mom and dad. And she got me in trouble. And her room had 2 doors. There was one to the right and there was one to the left. Then all of a sudden this door opens up and it's mom. She comes under a rain cloud, puts me over her knee, and bam, bam, bam. sets me up and walks out. As soon as that door closes, this door opens up. Guess who it is? I got paddled twice for the same thing. And my sister's loving it. Just scarred me for life. Just scarred me absolutely for life. All my problems because of that. There's not a parent that wishes they would have done something different. Get over yourself, move on. You haven't scarred them for life. Everybody drops the ball now and then, even Mary. Where am I at? Am I ready for 9? Man, I'm doing a lot better. Mary, now this is important to me. This is now, we're getting a little bit towards the end of the race, okay? Mary had a hell. Write that down. H-E-L-L. Mary had a hell. I love this phrase. Look at John 19:25. Look at John 19:25. One phrase. I love it. Near the cross of Jesus. Do you see where I'm at? Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother. Disciples ran away, all but one. Everybody's hiding. Everybody's checking out, looking out for themselves. But Jesus' mama was right there, going through the same hell. There's a mama in this room. I don't know where you're sitting, but I know you're here. You're going through hell because your baby's going through hell. Doesn't matter how old that baby is. Once you're a mama for life. I don't care how old your child is. If they're going through hell, you're going through hell. Carol Bottomley was sitting right where Jeannie's sitting in the first service. She had a son. She had 2 sons. Second son was had an aging problem. He aged very, very quickly. He was challenged mentally. He never weighed over 58 pounds. Her husband ran away once he saw what they were up against. For the beginning, it was good. In fact, for most of the year, she would say it was very good, even though she had to care for him every day of his life, had to care for him, lift him, feed him for 39 years. Her older son carried baggage because she could not care for both of them equally. Her younger son just was absolutely, totally dependent like a baby for 39 years. Just now, her older son is coming back, and some of the healing of the past is coming. Time heals. Yeah, it's something to celebrate, absolutely. The time finally came, just shy of his 39th birthday. It was very evident that Michael was on his last breath. And the last year and a half, he got dementia, and that was hell. That was hell for Carol. She would tell you honestly, she said some things and did some things in her frustration that she would love to take back. But it is what it is. And the day came for Michael to slip away, and she could tell it was in the middle of the night, dark, every light in the house out, and he was fighting for every breath, and she climbed into bed beside him, put her arms around him, just held him while he fought for his last seconds. 39 years were coming to a close, and she was there the whole time. She stood by that cross for 39 years. And when he drew his last breath and crossed the river, she just laid there with him for several hours, just holding her son in the silence. She stood by the stuff. I don't know what kind of hell you're going through, but we need you to stand by the stuff. The sun came up that morning for Carol, and the sun will come up for you. Stay by the stuff as best you can. Mary had a hell. The last thing I want to share, and then I want to have a prayer time, is that Mary had a hymn. I love ending on this. Mary had a hymn of praise. I want you to look at Acts 1:14. Acts 1:14. It says, they all joined together constantly in prayers, along with the women, and what? And who? And who? Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. It was right after Jesus ascended. In other words, she was there to the end. She ran through the finish line. She was there at the beginning, and she was there at the end. And she stood faithful all the way through. We need moms who will run through the finish line. We need moms who will be faithful all the way through to the end. You know the last thing my mom did for me on this side of the river? My mom ran through the finish line on October 5th, 1986. It was a Sunday night. I was preaching in Kokomo, Indiana. Oftentimes when my services were close to home, which was Marion, they would skip out on their church and they would come and they would hear their son, and that's what happened that night. They skipped out at Lakeview and they drove to Kokomo to hear me preach. And it was a good service. It went all right. I didn't feel great about it. I felt like I struggled, but we had a really good altar time, and a lot of people came, and there were many people who found Christ that weekend. And at the end, the preacher did something I always hate to do. He made me go out and stand by the door in the foyer. And I hate to do that because it's like, come tell me how good I did. Even though I bombed, come and shake my hand, tell me how good I did. I just hate doing that. But, he's the pastor and I was the guest speaker, so I went out and sure enough, thank you, great service. And even though it was a great altar, there was a great response, I just didn't feel good in my heart. I just didn't feel like I was at my best. And so I was struggling on the inside. Well, my parents, they would always hang around till the last dog's hung. In Indiana, we have this saying, the last dog's hung. It means they're the last one to go. And he just talk. And finally, they came out. And Dad came up to me. He said, good job, son, And I said, I went like this, And Dad, he didn't say anything. Last thing my dad did for me was this. He just said, hey, keep your thumb up. When Mom came out, she said, proud of you, son. And I said, I didn't feel so good, Mom. And you know what she did? She embraced me. She whispered in my ear and said, I'm so proud of you. Just like back there in that living room, in that assistant pastor's parsonage. And she laid one right here. And then she went out and crossed the river on the way home. It's the last thing she did. She ran through the finish line. About 3 years after that, you guys called me to Roanoke. And it was time to leave the church my dad built. It was time to kind of get out and move beyond my comfort zone. So I was cleaning my desk out. And I don't know if you know me well enough to realize that my desk there's stuff the light has not seen in 15 years. And so I was cleaning it out, and I was kind of lost in my thoughts. And as I was cleaning it out, I came across this card. I've got a lot of them laying around. I don't throw them out, but I don't have a special place. I just let them lay around. And I found this one, and it said, son, you're a very special person. And so I started reading it. And it's one that doesn't just have one page, it has several pages. And it said, you're a wonderful son, very special person. And she underlined a couple of those words. When you were younger, it was fun to think about what you'd be like when you grew up. And then you turn it again. But it's even more satisfying to see a fine person you've become, to look forward to all that lies ahead for you. And I'm just sitting behind my desk rereading this thing I'd forgotten about. You're someone to admire, an important part of your family, but still very much yourself, doing so many things that make others proud of you. It gets a little lengthy here. You always seem to know exactly what you want from life, and you work hard to get it. And one of the last pages, it's exciting to see the way you've taken each challenge and turned it into an achievement, the way you make the most of every opportunity. Yet, as busy as you are with your own interests and activities, you still take time out to show others that you care about them too. Sorry about the length of this thing. Although it's sometimes been difficult letting go, and letting you be your own person, it's been worth it to see it and appreciate it, the unique individual you've become. It's really a joy having you for a son, loving the very special person you are. And then in her own handwriting that only Mom could do, she had the greatest handwriting, wishing you his richest blessing and many more happy birthdays, Mom and Dad. And then I glanced over to this back side. I don't think you can see it. I don't know if Lincoln got a picture of it. But on this far side, it's a picture up there. My mom was a secretary. She was a secretary to the president. So she had these stickum things the secretaries have. And she stuck on the last page of this card this stickum, and it says, I'm still so very proud of you. I'm still so very proud of you, John. My mother had been in heaven for 3 years. And her love was still sustaining me. And in many ways, it sustains me to this day. She was a great lady who ran through the finish line. We need you to run through your finish line. The impact of a godly mother's life can sustain a child all the rest of their days. So don't be weary in your well-doing, no matter how hot the hell is. No matter how much grief, no matter how much pain, no matter how many mistakes, no matter how many questions. Trust Him. Surrender to Him. Stay by the stuff. Run through the finish line. God has a miracle for you. God has a miracle for you.